The Arab Spring of 2011 brought a wave of hope and change across the Middle East. Yemen, a nation long plagued by poverty and authoritarian rule, was no exception. Protests erupted, demanding an end to corruption and greater political freedom. President Ali Abdullah Saleh, a longtime ruler, clung to power. The situation quickly deteriorated, plunging Yemen into a state of political turmoil. The transition of power in 2012, while seemingly peaceful, did little to address the underlying issues. President Abdrabbu Mansur Hadi inherited a deeply divided nation. Political instability, economic woes, and social unrest created a breeding ground for conflict. Yemen, already one of the poorest countries in the Arab world, teetered on the brink of collapse. The fragile peace unraveled quickly. Armed groups, fueled by their own agendas, exploited the chaos. The stage was set for a conflict that would have devastating consequences for Yemen and ripple across the region. The hopes ignited by the Arab Spring soon turned to ashes. Yemen found itself locked in a downward spiral of violence and despair. In the northern highlands of Yemen, a group known as the Houthis emerged as a powerful force. The Houthis, followers of the Zaidi sect of Shia Islam, harbored long-standing grievances against the government. They accused the state of marginalization and discrimination. Their ideology, a blend of religious and political beliefs, resonated with many in the north. Led by Abdel Malik al-Houthi, the group gained momentum. They capitalized on popular discontent and exploited the power vacuum left by the weakening central government. Their military prowess grew, and they began to seize territory. What started as a local rebellion transformed into a national threat. In 2014, the Houthis stormed the capital city of Sana'a. They took control of government institutions and forced President Hadi to flee. The Houthis' swift rise to power sent shockwaves across Yemen and the region. Their advance southwards towards the strategically important city of Aden signaled their ambition to control the entire country. The Houthi takeover of Sana'a marked a turning point in the conflict. Saudi Arabia, alarmed by the growing influence of the Houthis, whom they viewed as Iranian proxies, decided to intervene. In March 2015, a Saudi-led coalition launched a military campaign, primarily through airstrikes, aimed at restoring the internationally recognized government of President Hadi. The coalition, consisting of several Arab countries, declared its goal to be the defense of the legitimate government and the protection of the Yemeni people. They framed their intervention as a necessary measure to counter Iranian expansionism in the region. The United States, while not directly participating in the conflict, provided logistical and intelligence support to the coalition. The coalition's intervention, however, escalated the conflict dramatically. What began as an internal power struggle transformed into a regional proxy war. The conflict took on a complex web of alliances and rivalries, with international actors playing a significant role. Yemen became a battleground for larger geopolitical interests. As the conflict escalated, so did the suffering of the Yemeni people. The unrelenting violence, coupled with economic collapse and a crippling blockade imposed by the Saudi-led coalition, triggered a humanitarian crisis of catastrophic proportions. The United Nations described it as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Millions of Yemenis face starvation. The conflict disrupted food supplies, and the blockade restricted the flow of essential goods. Children were particularly vulnerable, with thousands dying from preventable diseases such as cholera and malnutrition. Hospitals, lacking basic medical supplies and personnel, struggled to cope with the overwhelming needs. The conflict also resulted in massive displacement. Millions of Yemenis were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in overcrowded camps or in neighboring countries. They faced dire conditions, lacking access to clean water, sanitation, and healthcare. The humanitarian crisis became a defining feature of the Yemen conflict, a stark reminder of the human cost of war. Section 5. A fractured nation, internal divisions, deepen the crisis. The conflict in Yemen is not a simple two-sided war. It is a complex web of alliances and rivalries with various factions vying for power and control. This fragmentation has made finding a peaceful resolution even more challenging. The Southern Transitional Council, for instance, emerged as a powerful force in the south. Seeking independence or greater autonomy, they clashed with the internationally recognized government, despite being nominal allies against the Houthis. This internal division within the anti-Houthi camp highlighted the deep-seated regional and political fault lines that have long plagued Yemen. The conflict, rather than uniting the country against a common enemy, exacerbated existing cleavages. Local tribes, armed groups, and political actors pursued their own agendas, often at odds with each other. This fragmentation has had devastating consequences for the Yemeni people. It has prolonged the conflict, hindered humanitarian aid delivery, and made peace talks even more challenging. The various factions, each with their own interests and objectives, have struggled to find common ground. Section 6. The world takes notice. International reactions and peace efforts. The conflict in Yemen has drawn international condemnation and sparked efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The United Nations has played a leading role in mediating between the warring parties and providing humanitarian assistance. Special envoys have worked tirelessly to bridge the divides and bring the parties to the negotiating table. However, despite numerous rounds of talks and ceasefire agreements, a lasting solution has remained elusive. The conflict has been characterized by broken promises, violations of international humanitarian law, and a lack of accountability. The international community has faced criticism for not doing enough to stop the bloodshed and hold those responsible accountable. The United States, while initially supporting the Saudi-led intervention, has come under increasing pressure to end its involvement in the conflict. The humanitarian crisis and the high civilian death toll have fueled calls for an arms embargo on Saudi Arabia. The conflict has also strained relations between the U.S. and its European allies, many of whom have criticized the sale of weapons to Saudi Arabia. Section 7. A glimmer of hope. The path towards resolution. Finding a lasting solution to the Yemen conflict remains an immense challenge. The complexities of the conflict, the entrenched positions of the warring parties, and the involvement of regional and international actors make peace a daunting task. However, amidst the despair, there have been glimmers of hope. Recent months have seen a renewed push for dialogue and diplomacy. The United Nations continues to facilitate talks, and there have been some positive signs, including prisoner exchanges and a decrease in hostilities in certain areas. The international community has also stepped up its efforts to address the humanitarian crisis, providing much-needed aid to millions of Yemenis. A sustainable peace in Yemen will require a multifaceted approach. It will necessitate a political solution that addresses the legitimate grievances of all parties, ensures inclusive governance, and guarantees the rights of all Yemenis. It will also require holding those responsible for war crimes accountable and providing justice for the victims. Section 8. The long road ahead. Rebuilding a shattered nation. Even if a peace agreement is reached, the road to recovery for Yemen will be long and arduous. The conflict has devastated the country's infrastructure, crippled its economy, and left deep scars on its social fabric. Rebuilding a shattered nation will require a concerted effort from the Yemeni people, with the support of the international community. Reconstruction efforts will need to focus on rebuilding infrastructure, reviving the economy, and providing basic services to the population. Addressing the root causes of the conflict, such as poverty, inequality, and political exclusion, will be crucial to prevent future cycles of violence. Healing the wounds of war and fostering reconciliation among Yemen's diverse communities will be a long and delicate process. The international community has a moral obligation to support Yemen's reconstruction and help the country transition towards a more peaceful and prosperous future. This will require sustained financial assistance, technical expertise, and a commitment to working in partnership with the Yemeni people. Section 9. Echoes of Yemen. A cautionary tale for the world. The conflict in Yemen serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of proxy wars and the human cost of international inaction. It highlights the dangers of fueling conflicts through arms sales and the importance of prioritizing diplomacy and peaceful resolution. The world has watched as Yemen has descended into chaos, and it must learn from this tragedy. The international community must work together to prevent similar conflicts from erupting in other parts of the world. This requires addressing the root causes of conflict, such as poverty, inequality, and political repression. It also requires strengthening international mechanisms for conflict prevention, mediation, and peacekeeping. The Yemen conflict is a wake-up call, a reminder that we live in an interconnected world. Instability and violence in one part of the world can have far-reaching consequences. It is in everyone's interest to work towards a more peaceful and just world. Section 10. A call to action. The urgency for peace in Yemen. The people of Yemen have endured unimaginable suffering. They have shown incredible resilience in the face of adversity, but they cannot wait any longer for peace. The international community must act now to end the bloodshed, alleviate the humanitarian crisis, and help Yemen find a path towards a brighter future. We must demand that all parties to the conflict cease hostilities, engage in meaningful dialogue, and work towards a political solution. We must hold those responsible for war crimes accountable and ensure that justice is served. We must provide unwavering support to the Yemeni people as they rebuild their lives and their country. The time for action is now. Let us not allow Yemen to become a forgotten war. Let us work together to bring peace and hope to this troubled land. The future of Yemen, and indeed the world, depends on it.